The Florida Gators have their permanent opponents and their opponents for 2026 through 2029. And for once, they got kind of lucky.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free, wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Thursday, as always. I am Brandon Olsen, a lifelong Florida Gators fan, and also, if you want my written content about the Florida Gators, go to swampsignal.substack.com. Having a great time over there, not going to lie. This episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. And for those of you who don't remember, we'll recap this a little bit. The SEC is moving from 8 conference games to 9 conference games. Every Power 4 conference is now moving from 8 conference games to 9 conference games if they weren't already at 9 conference games. The Big Ten, despite the Locked On Big Ten squad being the biggest crybabies on the planet about, oh, well, you guys only play 8 conference games, and I'm going to cry, that whole little thing that they do over there. If you've ever watched, you know. They are the only conference that are not requiring 10 Power 4 games because now the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12 are all requiring 9 conference games every year and an additional out-of-conference Power 4 opponent. Honestly, I'm cool with that. Like, I know there's some people that are like, oh, then there's no break. I'm fine with it. That doesn't matter to me. I just think it'll make more entertaining football games, especially early in the season, instead of watching teams win 63-0 or 55-0 in Florida's case. But with that, the way that it's working out is that you will play 3 teams every year. Initially, they were called permanent rivals or permanent opponents. And they've kind of backed off of that. They shifted it to just calling them annual opponents that you're going to play every year, hence annual. But so you're going to have 3 teams that you play every year. And then your other 6 conference games are going to basically over the course of 2 years, you're going to play everybody in the conference, which is great because, you know, we sit here as Florida Gators fans. And we're like, oh, well, we haven't played Auburn in this long. We haven't played this school in this long. We haven't played Alabama in a long time. Like, that's not a thing anymore, right? But I think what Auburn was like 2019, 2020, and Alabama was 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So then now you get to kind of not have that where it's like, yeah, we haven't played this team in forever, or the whole we haven't played this team at home in forever. We talked about this I was on Locked On SEC yesterday with Chris Gordy, and we spoke about how, you know, Florida played or Texas A&M came to Florida for the 2024 season. Outside of that, the past 5 matchups outside of that one were at Kyle Field, Texas A&M. And so it's like, at least that'll not happen as much anymore. We'll talk about Florida's full slate later, but Florida's 3 permanent opponents, permanent rivals, annual opponents, whatever you want to call them, were Georgia, expected, South Carolina, and Kentucky. And when they first announced this a month or so ago that they were going to do this, and we found out that it's going to be 3 permanents, I thought that the 3 for Florida, because they said, hey, we're going to emphasize teams that are actual rivals. So, like, we're going to try to emphasize actual rivalries. And so my thought on that was, okay, Georgia's definitely going to be there. No doubt in my mind about Georgia. Then I thought that you would get one of LSU or Tennessee. You weren't going to get them both because, you know, they've each got their own rivals. Like LSU, I feel like, has a bunch of rivals at this point. So you weren't going to get them both, but I did think that the SEC was going to say, hey, this is like, that's must-see television every time that Florida plays either of those 2 schools. We're going to give them that. Obviously not the case because they got South Carolina. Again, I thought it would be LSU or Tennessee, not both. That didn't happen. And Kentucky was one that I expected. I'll be honest. It just felt like, and I don't know, maybe this was me going, well, who's your biggest rival? Who's a secondary rival? And who's a third rival, like a tertiary rival? And that was the way that I thought about it the whole time. It was like Georgia's the rival in the SEC. LSU, Tennessee, secondary rivals. Kentucky, tertiary rival. Instead, you get South Carolina, which we'll talk about that one a bit in the next segment more. But yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I don't hate that one. It's not a rivalry, but gonna become one, I guess, now for the next few years. And again, the Georgia one needed to stay. Like that was the most important one. That's the one where we say it all the time. Where it's like even if one team is good, one team is bad, you never know what's gonna happen in that game. I mean, look at last year, right? Last year, Georgia was clearly the better team in that matchup. Up until DJ Lagway got hurt, Florida was winning. And I'm not doing the thing that people do where they go, oh, Florida would have won that game if DJ Lagway stayed healthy. Because DJ Lagway got hurt in the second quarter. We have no idea what would have happened at that point. But I will say that Florida was leading at that time pretty definitively. And I know, look, Florida's first touchdown, or Florida's only touchdown at the time, came off of just a big play to Aiden Mizell. And then they kicked the field goal. But here's the thing. Georgia wasn't doing anything offensively. And as long as Florida's offense was able to give the defense a bit of a break, the defense was playing lights out at that point. Again, it was 10-0 when DJ Lagway got injured. And then it kind of just felt like the air got sucked out of the stadium from Florida. That just is what it is. Also important to note that while we're talking scheduling, because of renovations, next year, Florida and Georgia, so 2026, Florida versus Georgia, is in Atlanta, and Georgia is going to be listed as the home team. In 2027, that game is going to be played in Tampa, and Florida is going to be listed as the home team. I know that we've heard coaches talk about making that an actual home and home. I like the neutral site thing. I do. It just neutral site just gives big game feel, right? And look, if Georgia were to come to Gainesville or Florida were to go to Athens, it would still have a big game feel. But it always being a neutral site game just gives it a permanent big game feel. And so I like the neutral site part of that. I hate the team, I'll say that, but I like the neutral part of that. But and also I will say this in terms of how other teams had their rivalries shake out. Permanent opponents, annual opponents, whatever. I do think that Florida's pretty decent, right? Like Georgia's Georgia. South Carolina, very hit and miss, especially under Shane Beamer. And Kentucky, they're in flux. I mean, here's the thing, too. Florida's also in flux. But hey, whoever's the coach next year, bit of an easier slate than you've had this year. And like that's the thing where I said at the beginning, Florida kind of got lucky for once, is that I feel like ever since I took over this show in 2021, I took over. Then I feel like ever since then, it's every year it's just been like, all right, we got a freaking gauntlet coming down now. Not so much in 2026. I know that I'm saying this now, and all the teams that Florida plays are going to get the top 9 transfer portal classes. But there's that. Also important to note that for Florida, the whole you need to play a 10th power conference opponent. For Florida, that's Florida State, and it's going to stay Florida State. Like, you've already got that. Other schools need to figure things out, cancel games. But for Florida, you figured that out already. We're going to talk more about South Carolina, Kentucky, and the schedule when we get back with Locked On Gators. It is almost the weekend, and it's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. So let's break it down. And I'm going to be honest with you. I said him last week. I'm going to say him again this week. I'm going Cormani McClain. We're talking about a streak here. Cormani's got a little streak going of the just, again, the plays that you can't really quantify. The chase down tackle against LSU when everyone else looked like they kind of gave up. Cormani hauled ass to go make that stop, and he did. Ended up again, it ended up not mattering, right? They ended up just kneeling it out and ending the game. Score would have looked way worse, but again, for me, the important part is that you could have given up. Against Miami, Florida scores their first touchdown. It's 13-7. What does Cormani McClain do on the very next drive? Get a pick on Carson Beck. Florida did nothing with it. That ain't on him. So just like Cormani McClain is apparently delivering every Saturday, DoorDash also does. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply, promo period through November 18th. And the NFL season is here. If you're a New York Giants fan like myself, we're also a Florida Gators fan. It's already pretty brutal, but we got Jackson Dart starting for the Giants, right? So we'll see how that one goes. Surely won't backfire. FanDuel is making sure that you're ready for kickoff with a can't miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. If that's, I'm going to be brutally honest here. I bet Jackson Dart pick, and I bet Chargers defensive touchdown. Jesse Minter's maybe the best defensive coordinator in football right now. Good luck, Jackson. I wish you the best. Good luck. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free, wherever in the podcast and on YouTube. And I can't speak for every school and every program and how those schedules worked out, but I will say one unique thing with Florida that I do like, and maybe it's just because I like balance and things, is that for Florida in every year during this I hate the whole permanent switched to, we're going to call it annual, and every 4 years we reserve I don't even remember if I mentioned that, but every 4 years they reserve the right to change those annual opponents for parity purposes. They've said before, they're like, hey, we were going to say permanent, but we're going to say annual, and every 4 years we reserve the right to change that, because if some programs end up not taking football as serious, or some programs end up taking it more serious, we don't want one team to be screwed over with, imagine a couple years ago if it was like, hey, you're going to face Florida's schedule. Let's be honest. I was trying to think of something, and I was like, actually, let's just say a few years ago, someone was like, hey, you're going to have to face Georgia, LSU, Tennessee every year. And it's like, well, those are teams that have been vying for the college football playoff. Georgia or LSU ended really crappy last year, but you don't want to be stuck with that permanently, right? Especially Florida's struggled with that. Let's say if that was Mississippi State or Vanderbilt that had that every year, that would suck for them. If they just matched up with teams that became elite and stayed elite and sustained it, that would suck for them. So I understand the swapping thing. But again, what I will say is that I like the balance of, for Florida, the Florida and Georgia game is a neutral site game. Again, 2026, it is in Atlanta. 2027, it is in Tampa. And then 2028 and beyond, it is in Jacksonville until further notice, indefinitely, however you want to say it. But back in 2028 and beyond, Jacksonville again. You've got Kentucky and South Carolina are your other permanents, annual opponents, whatever you want to call them. I'm going to call them both probably, because they started by saying, yeah, it's a permanent, and then they shifted to, we're going to call them annual. And so I'm going to continue to screw them both up. But for 2026 and 2027, you've got, and really for this entire stretch, you've got one neutral, one home, one away with your permanent rivals. And something about that I just like if you're going to say rivalry, you guarantee having one home rivalry game every year. Because in 2026, you've got at Kentucky, but you're hosting South Carolina. In 2027, you've got at South Carolina, but you're hosting Kentucky. Something about that balance or something about guaranteeing a rivalry game every year at home, I love. Like, I love how that worked out. And again, I don't know if they were specifically like, hey, we need to, obviously I'm sure they were like, hey, we need to make sure that they have it every year. But the way that their stupid algorithm could have screwed Florida up, right? And so I do like that Florida at least got that one home game every year, despite having one neutral site rival. Because like you could have had a crappy situation of like, hey, we've got the neutral site rival and then 2 road games. Because some teams will have 2 road games in some years with 1 home game. And some teams will get luckier and have 2 home games. So you don't get that lucky part of having the multiple rivalry games at home every year. But I do think that having at least one is a good one. And again, for Florida, I feel like it's tough to complain about how these really shook out. Like, I feel like it's just tough to go, yeah, I'm upset with Georgia, South Carolina, Kentucky. Like, I think that's about as good as you could have gotten in terms of just luck of the draw, right? Like I feel like that's a pretty good matchup for Florida. You didn't get screwed with anything that's overly difficult, and you didn't get a cakewalk. You have Georgia in there, but South Carolina, we have no idea what they're going to be long term. We don't know what Shane Beamer is going to be long term. We don't know if Lenora Sellers is going to be back, and if he's not back, we don't know how Aaron Oland is going to work out. We don't know what their defense is going to look like long term. With Kentucky, Lord knows what they're going to look like. Probably bad. We can assume bad, right? But yeah, I do like the way that it worked out. I'm comfortable with the opponents. It's going to be interesting games. South Carolina, again, not a rival, but it's a fun mix-up or a fun twist to the situation that Florida has for 2026 through 2029 and maybe beyond. Who knows? I don't know if they're guaranteeing that they're going to, or they haven't said that they guarantee they're going to change it every 4 years, but I don't know if every 4 years they're going to take advantage of that and make the change just to make the change. But either way, I'm cool with the way this is working out for Florida, and I'm excited to see how it works out. And like I said, South Carolina, not a rival to me, but there's some fun in that matchup that Florida could have, especially against Shane Beamer, depending on who Florida's coach is going to be. Hopefully, not Billy. South Carolina being a rival, I'm looking forward to it. Honestly, I mean, I know that there's some overlap or history with Spurrier and Muschamp. But as far as it being a legitimate rivalry, like, I don't hate South Carolina. I really do. I dislike Shane Beamer. I've never been shy about that. I don't like Shane Beamer, but I don't hate South Carolina. It's going to be interesting. Chris Marler is there locked on. I will also say this. For 2026, we got a hell of a lineup for crossovers. Really looking forward to that one. But with the South Carolina game, like, I don't hate Shane Beamer. I dislike him. I don't hate South Carolina. I don't care about them. But I will remember this. And hopefully Florida will have a new coach next year. But I'm looking forward to facing Shane Beamer. Because Shane Beamer, if I'm not mistaken, is the only coach that has played Billy Napier multiple times at Florida and never beaten him. That's it. That's including USF. Shane Beamer is the only coach to do that and play him multiple times and not beat him. Lane didn't beat him, only played once. Vandy beat him. Kentucky beat him. Missouri beat him. Texas A&M beat him. Like, again, Shane Beamer is the only coach that's played Florida more than once with Billy Napier as the head coach and not beaten him. Even USF did that. That's crazy to me. Kentucky, like I said, I expected that one. Like, it's been an annual game, a rivalry game for a long while, even though, again, Florida dominated it for, like, even lately, where Kentucky's taken a few away from Florida. In my lifetime, Florida has still overwhelmingly dominated that series. The same thing with Tennessee. It's like, congratulations, Tennessee, you won a few. in my lifetime, Florida has still overwhelmingly dominated that series in terms of wins and losses. And I will say this also. The SEC was very open that they were going to consider rivalries in here. When I think of Kentucky, like I don't think of many rivals. Like I think of Florida as one of their biggest rivals. I think of Louisville as a big rival. But when I think of Kentucky, like I don't think of many big rivalries where I'm like, oh yeah, those teams hate each other. It's just not a thing that I ever see. It's just not a thing that I ever think of. So I will say that that's how I think of the Kentucky one. Is like I view them as a tertiary rival for Florida, but I do view Florida as a more heavily prioritized rival for Kentucky. Just because again, like I don't think of Kentucky as having many rivalries, at least in football. It's just not a thing that I think of, at least again in my lifetime, where they really haven't prioritized football much. And that's obviously on them. That sucks to suck, right? We are going to talk about the rest of the Florida Gators schedule when we get back with Locked On Gators. This episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Mazda's moving the game forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than just put points on the board, right? They move crowds, they move culture, and they keep moving the game forward. And in fact, I mentioned that I write now about the Florida Gators. I write swampsignal.substack.com. And I wrote yesterday about Cormani McClain and his transcendence, I guess, and his development at the University of Florida, where he came in as a very, very polarizing figure. You know, I was on the show and I was like, look, I'm going to treat him like any other walk-on. If he contributes, great. If he doesn't, okay, I'm not going to be mad about it. But he really is like, every time he does anything well, the whole roster just goes nuts for him. The pick six against Kentucky, everyone running onto the field. That is what I think of when I say, oh, like it does more than just put points on the board. Like it moves crowds, it moves cultures. Watch the broadcast of that. It's incredible. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. To wrap up today's episode of Locked On Gators, we are going to take a look at the 2026, really through 2029 schedule. We know who Florida plays in 2026, but we don't know exactly when they play them. In 2026 in the SEC, you've got Georgia, which is, of course, neutral site. You've got South Carolina, your annual. You've got Kentucky, your annual. You've got Auburn as your not annual. You've got Oklahoma as a not annual. You've got Ole Miss as a not annual. You've got Vanderbilt as a not annual. You've got Missouri as a non-annual, and you've got Texas as a non-annual, but it will be the third year in a row that Florida faces Texas and Ole Miss. So those are the only two where they're not your annuals, but you play them 3 years in a row because you did just have them in the past 2 years. Florida, of course, we knew would play Oklahoma for the 2026 season because when Oklahoma and Texas joined the SEC, it was announced, hey, if you play Texas in 2024 and 2025, then you're going to get Oklahoma in 2026. If you play Oklahoma in 2024 and 2025, then you're going to get Texas in 2026. So we kind of knew how that one was going to go. But you ended up getting both of them, actually. And we also know for some games, or really for all the games, we know who's home, who's away. Again, Georgia's neutral site. Auburn is at Auburn. Oklahoma is hosting Oklahoma in Gainesville. Ole Miss in Gainesville. South Carolina in Gainesville. Vanderbilt in Gainesville. Then you're on the road for Kentucky, Missouri, and Texas. The thing that we don't know is when they play, except for 4 games. We already know that the Florida Atlantic game, because again, while Florida just got their SEC slate, they did also just get, or they did now just get their entire schedule for their entire opponent list for 2025 or 2026, because you've got Florida Atlantic September 5th. You've got Campbell is your FCS game September 12th. You've got Georgia Halloween next year, so that game's going to be spooky, but I'm sorry I had to do it. And then you've got Florida State November 28th next year. That's it. Anybody else, you don't know when you play them. You only know who you play and where you play them. Then in 2027, because initially when this came out, I thought we were going to say, hey, whoever you play in 2026, you play in 2027. But the SEC decided that they don't want teams to go 2 years without playing each other. So you're going to play everybody every other year. In 2027, your SEC schedule is Georgia, South Carolina, Kentucky. You've got Alabama, Arkansas, LSU, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, and Tennessee. You've got that's also one thing. Like Tennessee, you play at Tennessee in 2027. In 2028, you play the inverse of 2026, which means that Florida doesn't host Tennessee again after this year until 2029, which just feels crazy. But your home schedule for 2027 is going to be Arkansas, Kentucky, LSU, Texas A&M. Your road schedule for 2027 is going to be Alabama, brutal, Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Your non-conference games are going to be South Alabama, Charleston Southern, and Florida State. So again, while every SEC team needs to play a 9-game SEC conference slate, SEC conference, that's not, that's the ATM machine thing, hate it. But your 9 SEC games, Florida for 2026 and 2027 already has their entire slate because you've got to play another Power 4 team. But again, like I mentioned earlier, for Florida, that's Florida State, and it's going to stay Florida State. And then, of course, you've got your FCS game for 2027 is Charleston Southern. And then in 2028, like I mentioned, you've got the inverse of 2026 for home and away. And that one, that schedule is going to change for sure. Because that schedule would be similar to 2024. You would have your 11 Power 4 games, no Group of 5 games, and 1 FCS game. That's just not going to be the case anymore. I highly doubt that because 2028 is supposed to be Colorado, Arizona State, Florida State, and Furman as your FCS school. And then again, 2026 is inverse. So you host Auburn as opposed to 2026 where you travel to Auburn. You host Missouri as opposed to 2026 where you travel to Missouri. Same thing for South Carolina. South Carolina is actually the same from 2026, right? Because they alternate every year since they're the annual one. This is going to take some getting used to. I'm just going to be completely honest about that one. But 2027, going to be an interesting one. Where again, that game is I believe back in or 2028, is back in Jacksonville for Florida versus Georgia, as opposed to Atlanta this coming season or 2026, and then Tampa 2027. It's an interesting way that they shaked it out. I do like that every year you're going to have, for Florida at least, the way that it happened to work out is that you're going to have, and I mentioned this earlier, is that you're going to have the 4 home, 4 away, 1 neutral site. That's not the same that's not the case for every school because not every school is going to have the neutral site, unless I'm mistaken on that one. But I do like that. I do like the inverse of you're going to play every team in the SEC every other year, or within every 2 years, you're going to play every team in the SEC. The only thing I don't know, there's a downside to it where, like, let's say in 2027 when Florida plays LSU again. I don't know why I chose LSU, but let's say when Florida plays 2027 LSU, that LSU's having a down year. Sure. 2028, you could maybe, get them down twice. Like, it's that kind of just advantage there. But of course, the opposite is like if Mississippi State is just running roughshod in 2027, you don't got to play them again in 2028 if they're having that elite couple year stretch. I do wish, like, my point there is that playing them in back-to-back years would be, again, an advantage and a disadvantage if you get to capitalize on if they're having bad years, but if they're having great years, that sucks. And I think it would also just be a better test to year over year how the programs are doing compared to each other. Like if Florida plays, that's 2027, I'll say Arkansas. If Florida played Arkansas 2027, 2028, you would have a better example or a better showing of how these programs stack up against each other in terms of how they're being built, because you haven't seen them, you don't see them often, but you get them at the same time back to back. Whereas opposed to 2027, 2029, a lot can happen in college football in 2 years. It really is crazy how much things can change now in college football with the transfer portal and all that stuff. But also, yeah, like I think overall for 2026 and honestly, 2027 is going to be a tough schedule. Okay. Like there's no way around that one. You're going to have Texas A&M if Mike Elko continues to do his thing. Tennessee if Josh Heupel continues to do his thing. Alabama is going to be probably Alabama again, the Alabama that most of us know. Mississippi State has been on the rise. We'll see what they're going to be. Jeff Lebby might leave for a better program. LSU, South Carolina is your annual. Could be a tough one. But again, for 2026 at least, that's a very manageable schedule. And like we could have the conversation that whoever the head coach is in 2026, hopefully it's not Billy Napier, whoever that coach is in 2026 is going to have a very manageable schedule. Like that, for the first time in a long time, Florida's going to have a manageable schedule in 2026. So that'll be interesting to see there. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free, whether it's in the podcast and on YouTube. We will be back tomorrow, talk more Florida Gators football for Locked On Gators. I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with swampsignal.substack.com, and I'll see you all next time.